Your secrets, if you really look at yourself, you would be speechless. What happened to being doctors and teachers? What happened to being your brother's keeper? Nowadays, kids more worried about the...
Yo, what's good, y'all? It's your boy, Mr.BandClap, and we in the building with another podcast, y'all. Yep, we back doing the podcast, man. I had to drop one because it's been so long since I've done a video like this. So, as we're winding down to the Archangel Michael Chronicles Part 5, I want to showcase and break down a movie that one of the Judas Iscariots that was in Michael Jackson's life, aka Steven Spielberg, directed. And I can't believe I haven't touched on this already, but hey, it's as good as time as any, right? So this podcast is gonna be The Many Faces of Oya Part 2, The Color Purple. Yep, we got a lot to talk about, y'all. So let's get this show on the road. Alright, y'all, so we back. Welcome to another BandClap TV podcast. Yeah, I mean, man, it has been a long time coming. My last podcast was in January. I'm like, man, I gotta do some more podcasts. Plus, I can't lie, I really like doing these, even though it takes a lot of research and it takes a lot of lead work on my end. I really like doing these. And like I said, you know, during this time period that we're in, I'm going to be throwing up a lot of different ideas, putting a lot of different things out there, and just seeing what are some things that you all would like for me to make more videos about. I never really thought about doing occult movie breakdowns or anything like that, because I mean, there's so many people out there that's doing it already. But man, I was just chilling in my room the other day, and I'm just laying in bed, got my little spliffy, and I'm looking at Sean Blazington and the live stream that he had going on. While he was doing his live stream, he started talking about the color purple. And during this time where we're pretty much stuck in the house, I've really been thinking about a lot of different types of stuff to watch. You know, I've been on my inner child thing, so I've been watching a lot of movies that I used to watch as a kid. And I've always been wanting to do a series about what cartoons taught me about spirituality. And it's still something that I'm working on. I don't want to say too much about it just yet, but I've really been thinking hard about it, especially since I've been revisiting a lot of stuff that I used to watch. But for some reason, it was just something about that thought being in my head about the color purple. I instantly turned off YouTube and I'm like, you know what? Let me watch the color purple again. Because see, the last time I actually watched the color purple, I think I was in high school, either high school or like my 8th grade year of middle school or something like that. I haven't watched color purple in years, but as we know, the color purple is one of those movies that's kind of like a staple in today's black households. You know, color purple is up there with Harlem Nights, Friday, Roots. I mean, the list goes on and on. I mean, I haven't even checked to see has any other spiritual teacher or anybody broke down the color purple. I'm pretty sure they have, especially people like your Black Dots and your KT the Arts degree. Shout out to those brothers. But with me knowing the information that I know now, especially dealing with the Orishas and African spirituality and stuff like that, you already know the first thing that I started to think about as soon as I just saw the title, The Color Purple. And you already know the Orisha that came to mind that represents the color purple. So I'm like, okay, maybe I can use this opportunity to do my first occult movie breakdown, but in a special way that I can do it. Because I mean, I don't know if Oya herself was channeling with me and showing me different things that I need to pay attention to this go round watching the color purple, or maybe it was just the sativa. But watching it with an open third eye, I just caught so much stuff. Some of it I kind of forgot, but most of it I retained. And I want to share this with y'all and see what y'all think. And would y'all like to see more of these types of videos? Now, you know I'm a Gemini and also a Life Path 11. So you know I'm gonna have to show things from both sides. And I may go back and forth when it comes to that, because it's really something that a lot of conscious people say, but I still feel like a lot of us don't truly get it in our heads yet, no pun intended. But a lot of us, we still don't realize how much this music media manipulation actually shapes us. I mean, a lot of us, we're starting to see it now because, you know, we're in this quarantine situation, so there's not really a lot of music media manipulation that can really distract you right now. And since you're now in the situation to where your connection to the outside world is so limited, and everything that you used to could go to, like your bars and your clubs and all that stuff, since all of those things are now closed, and all you got is the little music media manipulation that's still prevalent in this time, and now people are overindulging in that to the point where now you see how much of a non-factor that this music media manipulation actually was when it comes to the larger scheme of things. So now we're in a situation to where in a lot of cases you got more people in a fear-based state because they're feeling for their family, hoping that they don't get that dreadful phone call that one of their family members got the virus or something like that. I feel like in this time a lot of people are thinking more about that than I can't wait till the clubs open up so I can go twerk, or I can't wait until the strip club opens up so I can throw all my stimulus check money at the strippers. So now that a lot of our priorities and things like that is starting to shift, a lot of the pillars of this matrix that keeps it together, a lot of these pillars are now becoming exposed in a way that we've never really seen it exposed like this ever, really. You know, like I always say, you know, a lot of us quote unquote conspiracy theorists, we would be the only ones that would see it and call it out. And since we were the minority, nobody really wanted to listen to us like that until now. Since these pillars, aka towers, are starting to fall down right in front of our eyes, the owners of the pillars, and also the maintenance workers for the pillars, and also the people who were in charge of keeping the illusion around the pillars together so that way you can't see the pillar, all of these associating people that had these jobs are now jumping ship. They're stepping down and they're jumping ship. Now, with everyone that's getting into this hermit mode right now, a lot of people now are finally starting to put two and two together and really start to analyze and find out the different social constructs and the different effects and the different jobs and responsibilities of these pillars. Because it's like, you know, since the pillars are falling down, the tears in the matrix are finally starting to be exposed, and we're finally starting to really see the things that truly matter, the things that are beyond this matrix. And then us out here who are the spiritual teachers and the divine messengers, we're here to really confirm to y'all what these pillars represented, how they affected us up to this time, so that now we can get together and make sure that a matrix like this could never be built again, a matrix that is not in our favor. So when we talk about the black presence in movies and stuff like that, and we can take this all the way back to the days of blackface, we always knew that when it came to black and brown and melanated beings being on TV, it was always a situation where it was making fun of us, demoralizing us, emasculating us, effeminizing us, hyper masculine, hyper feminine. It was to the point where in the film industry, the melanated people were always in a subservient, bottom of the barrel type of position. And you have us occultists out here who thoroughly explain to y'all why this is the way it is, because we know that the eyes are the windows to the soul. And when it comes to this matrix that was created by soulless beings who want to make sure that while your soul is encapsulated in this thing called the human body, they wish to be able to control and put a stranglehold on every single aspect of your physical being, because they know that as long as this is the case, your soul is going to stay asleep, especially if there's not a lot of stimuli around to show otherwise. This is why we don't hear about things like the Gullah Wars and things like Nat Turner and all the many slave rebellions that happened during the 18 and 1700s. And even going back farther than that, we don't hear about the African kings and queens who fought against the Europeans and the British and the French and defended us from being enslaved. The soulless beings wouldn't dare put that type of stuff on film. The soulless beings wouldn't dare create a movie that shows the melanated man and the melanated woman in a high-ranking kingship and queenship type of position, because see, these type of things, when you look at these type of movies, it does something to you spirit-wise and mentally and psychologically. And in time, you're gonna slowly start to synonymize yourself with these great black heroes and heroines. And the more you see that, the more your soul is gonna wake up to see its true nature. And once it gets to that point, it is now impossible for you to be enslaved. And this is what the soulless beings knew. And while we're talking about the color purple, this is the horrible truth that Michael Jackson found out while he was in the industry a few years before his death. And this is when he really started to call these soulless beings out. And this is when we really and truly started to see the demise of Michael Jackson. And I brought this up because, as we can see, The Color Purple was directed by none other than Steven Spielberg. And I told y'all in the Archangel Michael Chronicles Part 3 how much of a Judas Iscariot that Steven Spielberg was. So, being the type of person that he was, it wouldn't sound so far-fetched that he would greenlight to direct a movie like The Color Purple. Now, one thing that y'all have to learn, and I know that Dolo the Pilot Man talked about this in his last live stream. There are two different occults. The similarities is both of these occults work in a very symbolic and in a very, very subconscious type of way. But the negative part about it is one of these occults, you're only going to be able to decipher and uncover and unlock this side if you're on that stage 3. And like I said, if y'all don't know what that means, go watch my podcast about the enlightened man. Now, when it comes to perception in movies, because I already talked about this in music, but in movies, it's different. There's always a 3-way perception, and when you draw it out, it's kind of like a triangle. This is the reason why you can't be a quote-unquote big wig in the movie industry unless you're one of these soulless beings who are in these high places in the fabric of this matrix. And it's real, real hard to break into that type of industry, especially if you're of melanated descent. So the top point on the triangle is pretty much what they tell you to think about the movie, pretty much what they want you to get out of the movie and what they tell you that you should feel and all of that. And then you got the right side of the triangle, and that's the occult when it comes to the satanic side of the game. Now, we all know that Satan means adversary, and I already broke down and talked about how when it comes to the portrayal of melanated people in movies, it's always in an adversarial type of way. And every time you look at these movies, for the people who are in the conscious community that's on that stage 1.5 or even stage 2, once you find out about the Illuminati and the different signs and symbols and sigils that the soulless beings use to covertly push their agenda in a subconscious type of way, these type of people would easily be able to tell you this part. And in a lot of cases, most people only stop there. Now, just to throw in as a bonus, you got the points that's in between the lines, and these people, they may add some gematria in there. Some people, they may add a little numerology, a few things like that in there. But at the end of the day, it's still on some underlying statement of these movies are evil and you don't need to watch them and you need to be a part of some religion to save yourself or something like that. And then the final perspective, the one that I was saying that you got to be on your 3rd stage of enlightenment and even the bonus stages, this perception is what you call the cosmic occultic perception. Now, with the cosmic occult perception, this is how you're able to see things in a more 360 point of view. So you really don't have any hatred in your heart towards the movie, but also you got your third eye open, but you're able to take the symbols and sigils that you see and you're able to bring them back to its cosmic origin. And with this, you're able to find different gems and you're able to find different synchronicities, spiritual and symbolic synchronicities in some of the worst movies. Shoot, you could see that in The Queen of the Damned, which was a horrible movie, but the occult symbology, right side and left side, was so rich in gems and symbols and all of those things that if you was looking at this movie in a third eye perspective, you would probably have so much content to be able to speak on. You'll be just like Bobby Hemmett, making 6 and 9 hour lectures and writing these super elaborate books and stuff. So the key when it comes to watching a lot of these movies is to be that person that's in the middle of the triangle, a person who was able to observe and see things from all perspectives simultaneously. And like I said, this isn't something that you're going to be able to do overnight, because it takes a lot of different knowledge. It takes a lot of things that you would have had to do a lot of research on your own, so that when you see different symbols and different things in these movies, you're like, oh yeah, I know what this represents because I did the research on this. Wow, I can't believe that they literally added that in the movie. And you'll start to get these revelations, and you'll start to get these epiphanies and stuff like that. So I urge a lot of my stage 3 and stage 2.5 people out there who feel like that they have a lot of occultic and spiritual knowledge now, go back and look at a lot of the movies that you grew up on back in the 90s and back in the 80s, some of y'all back in the 70s and 60s, and see how, thinking about it now, how these movies really affected your generation of people. See, my generation, we grew up on movies like Friday, How to Be a Player, Boys in the Hood, Barbershop, Soul Food, Booty Call, Thin Line Between Love and Hate, House Party, Poetic Justice, Waist Deep. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And along with those movies, we had soundtracks and we had music to back those movies. And then we started to get other different types of media to back that. So now I'm in a generation where a lot of what used to be OGs, a lot of them started to act like subconsciously those characters that they grew up with in the movies. And then those kids grew up watching those movies. And then they started to think that they need to act like what they see in the movies. They need to act like what they hear on the radio and all of that in order to be cool, in order to be hip, and in order to not be looked at as corny or lame or a square, as they used to say back in the day. And being honest with you, when you talk about the different anti-programs that were starting to be put out ever since the times of Jim Crow, which were subconsciously put out to shape the minds of our youth and our newer generations of melanated people. Because like I said, it took a long time for this to really pop off. You know it's bad when you got to take one for the team and dress yourself up and put ink all over your body and be and portray the exact person that you're trying to throw under the bus, simply because the people that you're trying to throw under the bus don't even act like that for real. But as you can see, just about every archetype of person that was first displayed in these demoralizing and degrading movies, instead of it being the other way around, now a lot of us, we can synonymize a lot of our lives in the hood and in the ghetto, just like Friday, just like Boys in the Hood. And when you look at it from a middle point, you can see how all of these things played a part in shaping our behaviors today, in shaping our belief systems today, and everything else under the sun. If you just really take some time and think about it. And I really don't even have to go in too much when we come to talking about how important the 80s really was when it came to the indoctrination and the emasculation and just the overall sabotage of the heart of the black community. We're coming from the 70s, where as a black people, we had a very strong moral code. We had a very strong moral compass and things like that. So these soulless beings knew that these movies and this music and all of this stuff that's gonna be coming out during this time, especially with the inclusion of drugs and all of that stuff, these soulless beings knew that them really amping up the music media manipulation in the 80s is gonna be just the seeds that they're gonna need to set the precedent for the way that the black community is about to go for the generations to come. This, and also with putting a lot of the OGs and warrior gods in jail, leaving the women wide open to have to learn how to adapt and survive and fend for themselves, and the impact that it's going to place on the children. So with this being said, like I said before, now you can see, with this precedent being set that I just said, now you can really see why a movie like this is so important when it comes to the right side of the triangle, which is the satanic occult. Now, y'all know for copyright reasons, I won't be able to just play the whole movie and give you a play-by-play about what's going on. And plus, it'll make this podcast way too long, So, I'm gonna just give y'all the synopsis of The Color Purple. Pretty much because I know most of y'all that's watching this either You heard about it, you've seen it millions of times, or at least you know the people who were the main characters of The Color Purple, and a lot of us know the different quotes of The Color Purple. So let's start from the beginning, shall we? And since we're talking about storms and hurricanes and wild winds and all of this type of stuff, I'm going to be going back and forth through all three forms of perception in a chaotic type of way. But for all my people that's on that stage 3 and even stage 2.5, y'all are going to get fully what I mean when it comes to this breakdown. So as we know, The Color Purple was derived from a book that was written by Alice Walker. Now, since I got a lot to cover, this is going to be quick, because in order for us to really understand the book, we have to be able to interpret the book in the same mind frame and in the same mindset of the author for us to truly be able to get a 360 view of this Color Purple. Now, Alice Walker was born on February the 9th, 1944. So you got the 2-9 with the February the 9th, that equals 11. And then when you add her full birth date together, it comes down to 29, which equals 11. So Alice Walker is a life path 11. Now, we know that the life path 11 represents that cosmic balance. And that's why the life path 11 is a master teacher number. And a lot of us, especially us that's new to the conscious community and the knowledge when it comes to consciousness and the different social constructs and their origins and stuff like that, a lot of us, we always looked at The Color Purple as a negative movie, especially black men. And on the flip side, a lot of the black women, they was able to find some good in the movie, because that was one of the things that Alice Walker intended for it to be. Now, with people like Alice Walker, who's born with a Leo moon, these are naturally good-hearted people, because we know that Leo represent the heart, and anything that is in your moon sign is shrouded in innocence. Now, the way that's going to be affected on an outward level using your sun sign, which in her case is Aquarius, that's what truly determines who you are on an outward level and how you express that, and also your ascendant sign, which is how people perceive you. Now, in addition, with her having this Mercury in Capricorn, Venus in Capricorn, Mars in Gemini, Saturn in Gemini, Uranus in Gemini, Neptune in Libra, I don't got enough time right now to break all these things down, but you doing your own research, this is going to show how all these things turned Alice Walker into the great writer that she is. And it also explains some things about her love life as well, because I think she has a white husband. I don't know if that's true or not. Y'all definitely let me know in the chat if that's true. I think so. All the sources that I've been seeing says that she has or has had a white husband, and it makes a lot of sense when you look at her natal chart. So for the pro Blackie Blacks, that's already a sign right there. Now, I haven't read The Color Purple book, so I can't go in too much when it comes to The Color Purple book, but the one assumption that she did clear up for me, and pretty much what I thought in general, was that there's a lot of discrepancies and a lot of indifferences when you go from the book to the movie. Also, what I found out was there were a lot of things, just like what happened in this Madam C.J. Walker movie. There were a lot of things that happened in the movie that didn't even happen in the book. So that should show you, if these soulless beings can do something like this with a fictional book, what makes you think that they're going to tell the truth when it comes to venerating and making movies to quote unquote uplift our black heroines and heroes? So this strengthens my point when I talk about how, with her being this life path 11, then we should already assume that this book is already going to have multiple personifications, multiple means of perception, and multiple meanings and messages to be taken away from. And even though Alice Walker herself might have had very good intentions, the true cosmic meaning of her book is hidden under so many layers of stereotypical anti-programming when it comes to the movie version, that nobody really has anything good to really say about The Color Purple unless you add in that religious church element to it. Like I said, these movies are meant to show and portray some of the most negative and demeaning conditions and environmental situations when it comes to the black community. Those things that probably used to go on in the black community in a lower level, lower number type of way. And then these soulless being movie companies take something like The Color Purple and portray it out on the big screen and change a lot of things that could show you black women and black men in a more positive light. And they slowly try to normalize these negative behaviors in the black community. And sometimes they just flat out lie, because anything that they can do to push their narrative and their objective, they're going to do it. And see, I said I wasn't going to do a lot of cutaways with this particular podcast, but to bring my point home when it comes to this, I want to let Sister Alice Walker tell you in her own words about the things that was going on behind the scenes and different parts of the movie that was taken out and all of that stuff. I want you to hear it in her words. So here's a small clip of Alice Walker talking about this.
There are some parts that I quibbled with because I didn't understand at the time that it's in the editing that a film is shaped. So I noticed that Stephen had shot almost everything I had demanded, that had to be there, but a lot of it ended up cut. And that wasn't very good to see. But the story is strong. It's a very robust story, and it's very universal, so that no matter how they cut it, it's always true. And that is what I really love about The Color.
Yeah, so you see what I mean? So with this being said, first, let's break down the positioning of this movie. Because see, a lot of people don't realize how intricate the process is when it comes to getting the right actors and the right actresses and the right environments, the right release dates and all of this stuff. People don't really realize the small little details that goes on when it comes to the impact of this movie, because every little small detail comes together to create the whole. And when everything is aligned correctly, the impact of said movie or said album or whatever is going to be very monumental when it comes to whatever symbol that you're trying to give a lot of power to, so that in turn that symbol or sigil can start to enact energy-wise whatever it is that you want that symbol to enact on the masses that watch the movie and stuff like that. So it's real deep. So we know that the color purple, Orisha-wise, represents Oya, and we also know that Oya is the goddess of Scorpio. And if I were to really be honest and really do a astrological breakdown on Oya, and this is just my conjecture, just by doing my meditations, getting familiar with her energy, and also doing my research and analyzing all the patakis that Oya has, all the different paths that Oya has, and all of these things, I could, on an educated guess type of way, say that if I were to do just a simple sun, moon, and ascendant sign for Oya, she would be a Scorpio sun, a Sagittarius moon with a Virgo ascendant. Reason why I say Sagittarius moon, because we all know the great Sagittarian philosopher to be Obatala. And in the Patakis, we know that with Sagittarius being that fiery sign and the masculine sign, it's always been said that Oya had that fire of a man on a solar level. And plus, in a lot of ways, Oya took after her dad and her grandmother, Nana Baruku, a lot. Now, I chose the Scorpio sun sign because we know that not only are Scorpio suns very intuitive, they're highly spiritual, and these are some very innate qualities in Oya. In a lot of ways, they can also be self-destructive and destructive to others if they haven't been taught the right type of way of how to dispel their negative emotions in situations. And plus, we also know doing research that Oya was physically beautiful. I mean, extremely physically beautiful. And she was looked at as the goddess of the marketplace, a very business savvy woman, aka the Virgo ascendant. But she was also kind of known as that crazy woman who's immaculate in bed, because we know that Scorpio and the 8th house represents that sex, transformation, and stuff like that. And Oya wasn't Shango's favorite lover for no reason. You know, Oya and Oshun are totally different when it comes to that department. So I would suggest that if this color purple on a stage 3 level is supposed to be about the many faces of Oya, then on a stage 2 level, I should then be able to spot a lot of 8s, a lot of Scorpio signs, a lot of Sagittarius signs, and a lot of Virgo placements that should back up what I can already intuitively see on a stage 3 level, which would then make the stage 1 synopsis make sense when it says that this movie is about a black Southern woman who struggles to find her identity after suffering abuse from her father and others over 4 decades, which is what the IMDb website says about the movie. So now I gotta add the number 4 also. All right, so let's get started. The movie The Color Purple was released on December the 18th, 1985. Now, we know that even though Oya represents that number 8, she's also known as the mother of 9, which makes sense because 8 comes before 9. So if this release date don't equal out to either an 8 or a 9, I mean, we're all wrong sometimes, right? And I'll admit when I'm wrong, and we can just cut the video off right here. Man, when you add those numbers together, it equals 35. 5 plus 3 is 8. That Oya energy is all over this movie. Man. So just with knowing this alone, this movie is going to have hella drama in it. Just with that. Because see, we have a lot of people out here who are so engulfed and so ingrained in the religious aspect of the Orishas that they forget that the spiritual system of the Orishas have nothing to do with your Christian religious upbringing. These Orishas, a lot of them were regular people just like you and me. And these people went through some very, very hard and fucked up trials and tribulations in order for them to ultimately be venerated as the Orishas that we know today. But like I said, looking at this in the aspect of the Orishas, which ultimately represents different paths that we all have to go through to become the most divine version of ourselves. Something that if this was out in the forefront and many people knew about this, it would help us to understand this movie a lot deeper, and we will be able to get some positive things from it. But like I said, this part is the part that's hidden. So for the people out here that were under a rock and you truly don't know what The Color Purple movie was about, this is just a quick synopsis to kind of let you know what it was about. So the synopsis on Wikipedia says that this movie is an epic tale spanning 40 years in the life of Celie, which is played by Whoopi Goldberg, an African-American woman living in the South who survives incredible abuse and bigotry. After Celie's abusive father marries her off to the equally abusive Mr. Albert Johnson, that's played by Danny Glover, things go from bad to worse, leaving Celie to find companionship anywhere she can. She perseveres, holding on to her dream of one day being reunited with her sister in Africa. So this is pretty much the mindset that these soulless beings and all of that who put this movie together, this is what they want you to get out of this Color Purple movie. So I already pointed out that this movie was not only released on the number 8, but when we look at Steven Spielberg, who directed this movie, this is Steven Spielberg's 8th film as a director. So we got this number 8 all around. Now, we know that The Color Purple wasn't the first movie that portrayed the black woman in this negative light, and it's for damn sure, unfortunately, not gonna be the last movie to show the black woman in a negative light. And I mean, looking at this from a stage 2 perspective, I could see why black men in general were so disgusted at this movie. But see, the messed up part about this is the way these anti-programs and this poison and this toxin has infiltrated our community so bad, to the point where, just like how these soulless beings wanted it to be, I can say with a clear conscience that now, in this time that we're in now, every single archetype of man and woman that was in that Color Purple movie, when it comes to the black men and the black women, now you see these archetypes exhibiting the result of these anti-programs right in front of your eyes. And like I say, this is really, really sad to see on a big screen, because back in that time, black people were actually doing great things. And this is a good way to really put a damper on black progress and black love and all of those things, just to fit the soulless being narrative that's being portrayed. But then when I start to look at this from a very, very stage 3 type of perspective, that's when you start to see that everything is everything. Meaning that even though this movie shows you a lot of the dark sides of the Scorpio, with us being able to add in the missing pieces that the soulless beings tried to take away, we can show you the more positive aspect to get out of the movie. So now, just like how I broke down who Alice Walker was, and I broke down about the different energies that need to be in certain positions in order for this movie to really portray energetically what it's supposed to. Now, this is my conjecture, but these actors and actresses that's playing these different characters to portray this Scorpio energetic movie, it's my conjecture that they gotta have some Scorpio and some Sagittarius in their charts, with Alice Walker being an Aquarius, I wouldn't put it past her to add some Aquarius in there too, to really get the message across, because you know Aquarius is an air sign. So let's break down for a minute the characters that are in The Color Purple, at least like the main characters. So when we talk about The Color Purple, one of the first characters that we see when we're talking about this movie is Leonard Jackson. And Leonard Jackson, he plays Pa. Now Pa, as you can see when the movie first begins, he plays the most intricate part and the most pivotal part when it comes to the mental state and the psychology and the mentality pretty much of Celie. Now, since we know that Alice Walker is a life path 11, so there's two sides to this. Since this is a Many Faces of Oya and they try to portray this in a negative light, then there should also be some examples about them portraying Ogun in a negative light too. But they did it in a certain type of way to make them seem like the most powerful instead of Ogun. But I'm going to explain that as well. Now, since Leonard Jackson really set the precedent for the way the black man is to be looked at throughout this movie, because I don't know if y'all really peeped this, but there's not really a lot of archetypes of black men in this movie. You only really got like 4 or 5 true archetypes, with the divines kind of in there sprinkled in, and I'll touch on that as well. So just a little bit on Leonard Jackson. He was born on February the 7th, 1928. And when you add his numbers together, it equals 29, which is the number 11. Now, this means that out of everybody, Pa definitely is the most important part of this movie. And as I go further, you're really going to find some things out about this. So you already know that hit me. So then when I look at his astrological information and I see that he has a Aquarius sun with a Virgo moon, I was like, oh snap, didn't I tell y'all? The signs to look out for, if my synopsis spiritually is true, is Scorpio, Aquarius, Virgo, and Sagittarius, and he got both of them. Now, the trifecta, the straw that broke the camel's back, is when I looked at his Lilith sign, because he didn't really have a positive influence in the movie at all. I mean, he's the reason why Celie was so messed up in the head the way she was. And when I found out that his Lilith was in Scorpio, I was like, man, that nigga was perfect for this role, being Pa. Now, generally, Lilith is already exalted in Scorpio, meaning that Lilith is in her most potent form. So that sexual energy, not only is it in its most potent form, it's also in its darkest form, which leads to things like obsession and jealousy and all those other negative aspects that comes with that, which is what you see and what they portrayed in The Color Purple. Because you know, when it comes to the black man, they're not going to show the positive aspects. They're going to always show the negative aspects, especially when we got the soulless beings telling the story. So now it makes sense that they would cast Pa to play this very demeaning role as Celie's stepfather, because like she said in the book and in the movie, her real father got killed off by some white men. So she never really knew her real father like that. And it got to a point where the stepfather and her mother's marriage got so messed up to the point where she stopped wanting to be sexually available to him. So since he couldn't get his rocks off with his wife anymore, he would rape Celie. And not only did he rape Celie in a incestuous type of way, Celie, by 14 years old, 4 + 1 is 5, Ocean with the twins getting taken away. By the time she was 14 years old, Celie has now had 2 children by her own stepdad, and both of these children got taken away from her and sold off. So in a stage 2 way, and even affects certain perceptions in a stage 3 way too. But on the stage 3 side of the game, we already know the story of Oya from the last podcast. And we know what happened when Obatala wasn't around and Ogun was the man of the house. And we also know, since we don't look at these Orishas the same way that we would look at Jesus or anything like that, we know that when it comes to the archetype of these Orishas, that's what they are. They're just archetypes. So with that being said, on that type of level, if a Oya grew up either experiencing that situation, like when Ogun was raping Yemoya and she was witnessing it as well, or like this situation where you got a girl that don't really know her dad and has been raped multiple times by her stepdad, had kids by her stepdad that she can no longer see because her stepdad gave them away in hopes that the wife don't find out. So now she's all messed up in the head, got all of these secrets that she can't tell nobody and all of this stuff, you will see why she would end up marrying the character Mr., which was played by Danny Glover. And we all know how much of a jerk and a horn dog that Mr. was in The Color Purple. Now, talking about the archetypes of men that were in this movie, The Color Purple, this is why most of us men that look at this movie in a stage 1 and stage 2 perspective, we really don't like this movie because mainly the way that black men were betrayed in this movie. And this is some homework for y'all. I want y'all to take some of your favorite movies that you came up with and you grew up with, some that showed our black men and black women in such a negative light. And I want y'all to look up these actors and actresses' natal charts and see why these actresses and actors were selected to play these parts. And this is the reason why they can play them so well, because it's kind of like, you know, if you line things up like this, you're not even really acting. You're just kind of being you. So when we look at this from the man side of the game, it kind of puts this movie in the light of the reason why the women characters like Suge, Celie, Nettie, and even Sophia, the reason why the women characters were all messed up in the head and going through different things was because the male characters in the movie that was supposed to represent power, you can see how the black man was poorly represented, but the white man was highly venerated. Now, what do I mean by this? Let me break down for a small minute the 5 archetypes of men and the type of power or domination that they represent in this movie. You got Pa, played by Leonard Jackson. His Lilith in Scorpio shows you that he exuded his power in a hyper-masculine way using sexual domination. That was his power. And then we got Albert, or Mr., who was played by Danny Glover. Danny Glover, his Lilith in Capricorn speaks on things like sexual perversion and a lot of things of that nature on the dark side of things. So it makes sense that he was selected as another main character in the Color Purple movie, and his role was to show a hyper-masculine version of showing his power and dominance through stability, because in the movie, Paul would marry Celie off to Mr. And even though Mr. was as bad, if not worse, than Pa, but Celie was just so happy to get away from Pa, and at least she had some type of stability when it came to Mr. So that's the reason why she took so much of the abuse that was going on. And it also speaks on how he was just an open sexual deviant with the relationship that he had with Suge, who openly had some type of STD or something like that. But since she was so beautiful and captivating, he was so enthralled by that, and he couldn't sexually control himself, that he would pretty much disregard all of those type of warning signs dealing with Suge. The third character that I want to point out is Harpo. And Harpo was the son of Mr. And with him being so coddled as a child and never truly being taught the ins and outs of dealing with women and things like that, Harpo was pretty much a pushover, and he represented the effeminization of the black man. And with him, he always went through turmoil, especially dealing with Sophia, who would openly cheat on him and had all these kids by him and all of this stuff. And she could just go in and out his life as she pleased, because she knew at the end of the day that he was going to end up taking her back. So she was dominating him. And then the fourth archetype, which really is kind of like an honorable mention, and that's the pastor, because the pastor is the most spiritually adept and supposed to be the most enlightened man in the whole movie. But since he's dealing with religion, which is like the lowest form of spirituality, he too is powerless. I mean, he can't even control his own daughter, and ain't no telling what was going on in his family that resulted in Suge being so wild and crazy like she was. And then, last but not least, the most powerful man that was portrayed in The Color Purple was the mayor. You know, that white mayor who stepped up to Oprah when she said, "Hell no, I'm not gonna clean up y'all house." And it was because of him that Oprah, aka Sophia, ended up in jail for 12 years and still had to end up being the mayor's maid. Now that's power right there. And also, as an honorable mention, the white dude that had that iron gun that pistol whipped Sophia, giving her that black eye, that's synonymous to the Ogun and Yemoya abuse as well on a stage 3 level. Now, I really hate to say this, but when it comes to the representation of the black man in this movie, in order for you to get the spiritual and the stage 3 significance of this, you got to take the negative representations of the black men. And you gotta put this into perspective about Oya, because I've been talking with a lot of women who are Scorpios and women who are daughters of Oya, and I see that they got so much in common when it comes to this color purple. And it's sad to say that, just like I said, all of these archetypes of men, even though it was so far-fetched back then, you can see these archetypes of men now as we speak. And this is the reason why, if you went through a situation where you had to deal with any of those archetypes of men, when you grow up, you're not gonna really have a high capacity for men or a high capacity to love. Because I mean, really pay close attention to the things that was being said by Celie in that monologue when the movie first started. Listen to how she was talking about how she pretty much lost her capacity to love. And since she's been raped so many times as a child, she don't even have any type of feelings or any type of intimate desires or anything like that when it comes to sex. In other words, she feels very numb and very aromantic and very emotionally unavailable. And even though we know that a lot of Scorpio women, a lot of Virgo women, a lot of Sagittarius women deals with these type of men, like I say, I still don't like the fact that this is what we can say as a black community. This is a movie that we're proud of, that we grew up on, because 10 times out of 10, nobody's looking at this Color Purple movie the way I'm going to show you about how this also represents the many faces of Oya. So in a lot of ways, it's personifying and it's amplifying too much of the negativity that goes on, like I say, in the small pockets of the black community. But they don't like to show the other side, because at the end of this, I'm going to talk about what really makes Oya balanced. Because a balanced Oya, man, they don't want to show y'all that. You think Storm from Marvel is something. Man. So let's keep going. So for now, I'm done talking about the men. Now, let's talk about how the women are portrayed in this movie about the color purple. So, like I said in the beginning, I'll know if this is really about Oya, if don't most of these actresses that's playing in this movie got some type of significance to Oya, whether they got strong presences of Scorpio, Virgo, Sagittarius, or Aquarius in their natal chart. So let's see. The first character, the main character, Celie, which is played by Whoopi Goldberg. Now, Whoopi Goldberg, she was born on November the 13th, 1955. She is a double Scorpio. Y'all hear that? She is a double Scorpio. She's a Scorpio sun and a Scorpio moon. She's an Aquarius ascendant, midheaven in Sagittarius, and guess what? Her life path is the number 8. Man, I can just cut it off right here. Like, if y'all don't see how on an occult level these actresses are picked out and hand selected to play these roles, to personify and amplify a certain type of energy to be put out to the masses in a negative scale, because, you know, we're dealing with soulless beings. But if y'all can't see that, man, I don't know what to tell you. I don't know. You might need to do some more shadow work or something. And when I tell you, she played that role of Celie to the T. Now, this is probably where I'm going to spend most of my time at on this podcast, because with Celie representing Oya, this is where I really start to talk about the many faces of Oya and how they all come together. Now, what type of path of Oya, or what type of representation of Oya is this Celie in the color purple supposed to signify? Well, we can find this by looking up the name Celie. And when we look it up, it's derived from a Latin and Greek roots that means blind. So Celie means blind, and it also can mean the moon as well. So when we put it together, this is going to be a occult, cosmic occult movie about how Oya would live her life if her moon is blind. AKA, Celie is a representation of what a lot of Scorpio women would go through when they're blind and they don't know themselves. They don't love themselves, and they don't understand yet how powerful they are and how fierce they are and how courageous and strong that they are. They don't know that yet. They're blind. Now, I know on my podcast, I like to talk about the 7 African powers. And with that, I talk a lot about Oshun, Yemoya, Oya, Obanani. But one thing that this Oya energy pointed out to me is I'm really going to start showcasing a lot of other Orishas that y'all may or may not have heard of before, because Oshun and Obanani isn't Oya's only sisters. So in this podcast, I'm going to showcase 2 of Oya's sisters that you may not have knew of. Her first And her most important sister, her name is Ayao. So if we're talking about how Oya represents the number 8 and also the number 9, but in this instance, we're talking about the number 8 because Oya and Ayao, they both share the number 8 together. Because just like in The Color Purple with Seely and Nettie, Oya and Ayao are inseparable. And when it comes to storms and stuff like that, they're usually seen together, because if they represent the number 8, then that means that the circle at the top, which represents the whirlwind, that would be Ayao, and the circle at the bottom would represent Oya, meaning the hurricane. Y'all see it now? So Ayao is the Orisha of the whirlwinds. She is known as Oya's younger sister, and like her sister, Ayao is powerful, smart, and fierce, and they are venerated together. So like I just pointed out, Ayao, spelled Ayao, is personified in The Color Purple as the character Nettie. Now, when we look up the name Nettie, it's a derivative of the word Annette and a French diminutive of Anna, which means gracious and merciful and sincere, which at heart represents who Ayao is, because in a lot of ways, Ayao represents the whirlwinds that start before the hurricane. So it's kind of like that warning to let you know that there's a bigger storm that's coming. So you need to get prepared and do the things that you need to do. So when we talk about this movie, once Seely gets married off to Mr., she then sends for her sister, Nettie, to be with her. And even though it was a lot of fucked up stuff that was going on in that house with Mr. and Seely, the fact that Nettie was there, it just made it all worth it. Because if there was anybody that Seely trusted, was merciful with, and gracious with, if there was anybody that she trusted more than anyone, it would be Nettie. And just like she said in the movie, they never want to be apart. And that's the same relationship that Oya and Ayao had. Now, I told you, Ayao is fierce and powerful as well, just like her sister. And you can really see that in the scene of The Color Purple, because just like Suge, which I'm gonna talk about her a little bit later, Nettie was very, very beautiful as a little girl, even more beautiful than Seely. But just because Nettie was beautiful didn't mean that she was gonna take Mr.'s shit. So y'all remember in the movie where Mr. was trying to follow Nettie out into the wilderness, and then he tried to rape her, and she hit that nigga in the nuts with her backpack that was filled with that heavy book that she had. Because if we was talking about astrological signs, it wouldn't be so far-fetched to say that Ayao would represent the Aquarius zodiac sign. Because as we can see in Color Purple, while Nettie was living with Seely, she used her wisdom and her knowledge and her smarts, and she was teaching Seely how to read, she was teaching Seely how to write, and all of these different things. And she was really that backbone that was slowly trying to teach Seely those things about herself that's going to make her a very smart woman as well, had she stayed around. But as you know, in the movie, the unthinkable happened, where because Nettie didn't want to have sex with Mr. ended up throwing Nettie out. And this is really when Seely's life really made a turn for the worse, because when Oya loses her identity and she becomes blind, man, it's just so sad to see all that power and all of that just go to waste. But you know, there's no such thing as potent power going to waste when we're talking about the soulless beings. That's why it's so important that we teach these things to the youth, and that the parents are enlightened as well. Because if you see that you just had a child and that child is exhibiting some warrior god or some light being or some divine masculine or feminine qualities, then you know that you're going to have to do a little extra when it comes to raising that boy and that girl, so that they can truly live up to be as closely as they can that god or goddess that they was before they even came here. So once the communication between Nettie and Seely was severed, it went all downhill for Seely. Now, Nettie held her end of the bargain, and she was writing to Seely, but as we know, Mr. would hide the letters so that Seely couldn't find them. So she was all blind out here. Now, while Seely was going through these dark nights of the soul, because I feel like Scorpios and Pisces have the most intense dark nights of the soul. Oh my God. She gets older, she gets grown, and this is where we're introduced to Sophia, which is played by Oprah Winfrey. And let's see if the astrology lines up to her part, which it is, because just like those men actors that had that life path number 4, Oprah Winfrey is a Aquarius sun with a Sagittarius moon and a Sagittarius ascendant. So as you can see, she was perfect to play this part. And she was so good that The Color Purple is one of Oprah Winfrey's most widely known movie. So we know that Sophia represented a large, fiercely independent woman who befriends Celie and marries Harpo. Sophia refuses to submit to white men or anyone else who tries to dominate her. And after defying the town's mayor, Sophia is sentenced to 12 years in jail, but the sentence is later commuted to 12 years labor as the mayor's maid. So on a stage 2 level, you got this heavily traumatized black woman in Celie, and she kind of is supposed to represent a lot of things that today's black women went through, and their mothers went through, and their mothers went through. And as of right now, due to her only sense of identity being taken away from her, she's powerless at this point. And then we got Sophia, aka Oprah Winfrey, and she's the loud black mammy. You told Harpo to beat me. And she over here mistreating and being all nasty to everybody. She don't even respect her own husband, Harpo. And the reason why Celie even told Harpo to beat her was because Sophia was running all over Harpo, and Harpo couldn't really control Sophia. And since the only dominance that's ever really been portrayed in Celie's life is toxic abuse, just like in our black families today, the reason why we still whoop our kids is because our parents did it, and our grandparents did it, and our great-great-grandparents did it, and it goes all the way back to the slave master. But as we see, and a lot of this still goes on today, Sophia was able to nut up on all the black men. But as we know, Miss Millie and that mayor represented the true representations of power, because there wasn't really any true consequences when she was talking back and nutting up to the black men. But as soon as she talked back to that Miss Millie and said, hell no, I'm not gonna watch your kids, and Miss Millie was doing all that disrespectful stuff, treating her children like they were puppy dogs and all of that stuff, the one time she thought she could do what she did to the black men, to that white woman and that white man, she got a rude awakening. And for the rest of the movie, she was a very powerless, docile, and weak-looking woman for the rest of the movie. Now, the next female character that gets introduced into The Color Purple is Suge Avery. So if Sophia represented the mammy, then that means that Suge Avery, she represented the harlot. And man, I can't lie, man. I don't care about what y'all say, but out of all the characters in The Color Purple, Suge was the sexiest out of all of them. Man, I had to kind of do a double take. I'm like, wait, I forgot how beautiful and how sexy Margaret Avery, because that was her name, Margaret Avery. I forgot how sexy Margaret Avery actually was. And it's funny because even at 76, she still looks good. But her being a Scorpio moon really drives my point home about this movie, because she plays a very pivotal part in Celie's life. But a little bit on Suge Avery. Not only is Suge Avery portrayed as a woman with dubious morals who dresses scantily and has some sort of quote-unquote nasty woman disease, whose sexy style, sharp tongue, and many worldly experiences make her appear jaded, Suge is also a preacher's kid, which means that not only do Suge Avery have physical talents like her beauty and her being able to captivate people and stuff like that, she also has spiritual talents as well, meaning that she can sing, and that whole God is trying to tell you something is a testament to how spiritually inclined Scorpios can be. Because man, I can speak from experience. My mom, man, I talk about my mom so much, you know, she really protected me a lot spiritually as a child. And just like how I'm reminiscent on my mom, when Celie started to look at Suge started to remind her a lot of her mom, and they started a very close friendship, because as we know, Suge was one of the main factors in Celie's life that really helped Celie to get out of her shell, help her to start loving herself, and help her to really start appreciating who she is physically and psychologically. Now, you know, with this sick ass movie industry that likes to get off on certain things, they had to make Celie and Suge be in some type of sexual relationship or something, which in the book it kind of alluded to it, but I don't think it said in writing that they had sex. I don't think so. Like I say, Y'all can say in the chat or in the comments if I'm wrong about this or not. And as far as the stage 2 perspective, the black woman who's the preacher's kid going wild. So now she's out there singing the blues. Her parents are worried about her because she out there hoeing around and thotting it up. I mean, don't this sound like the Tyler Perry movies that come out today? So I kind of broke down, as much as I want to on this podcast, the different perspectives from a stage 1 and stage 2 arena, talking about The Color Purple and talking about how detrimental this movie can be if you're not looking at it in a stage 3 enlightened being type of way. So now, since I got all that out the way, to really bring this home, let me show you how this Color Purple movie was really talking about the journey of Oya. Because towards the end of the movie, Celie has finally broken free from Mr. and all of that stuff. And while her and Suge and Sophia are living happily ever after, or so we think, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, because of a deed that Mr. ended up doing, I guess, before he died, Nettie ends up reuniting with Celie. And with her, she got Celie's 2 children, Olivia and Adam. And in the scene, Nettie is running to Celie, and she got this purple sash around her, which shows that it was with her reuniting with her sister and being able to find those letters and all of that stuff. That's when Celie finally and truly became whole. And there was a lot that happened when it came to the book, Alice Walker said. There was so much more in the book about Celie's life as a free woman and as a whole woman, but all of those things were low played and damn near non-existent in the Color Purple movie, because these soulless beings only want you in a low vibrational type of disposition, energy wise, when you watch these movies. So they don't want to show you in a venerated position, even after you was pretty much abused and battered and bruised and all of this stuff throughout the whole movie. So finally, now let's break this down on the stage 3 type of level and show you how this movie really talks about how a Oya goes through her stages of enlightenment. Now, like I said, we know that Oya is called the mother of 9. In the Patakis, it says that she had 9 stillbirths where she tried to have children, but they never ended up coming into fruition in the physical world. So if Oya is the mother of 9, and we also know that in some Patakis, she also helped Oshun take care of her Ibeji twins, because at the end of the day, even though Oya is a very protective, sometimes overly protective mother, her heart is in the right place. And when balanced, she can actually be a very, very good mother. Keyword, when she's balanced, because she has to get into a situation to where she looks at all the negative things that she's been through in her life, because Oyas go through a lot of negative shit. She has to look at those things as wisdom to teach her children, so they won't end up in the same pitfalls that she ended up in. Now, as above, so below. And when we really think about it, Celie was a mother of 9 in The Color Purple, because Mr. had 4 children that she was taking care of. And then when Sophia went to jail, she had to help take care of Sophia's 5 children. So in all, she took care of 9 children. And then in the end, when she ended up being back reunited with her 2 real children, that equaled 11, which kind of represents the cycle returning. Because as we remember, at the beginning of the movie, it started out with a person who was a life path 11, which was the guy who played Pop. And now in the end, we got the other 11 when she's reunited with her 2 children. So lastly, how does this really, really explain the many faces of Oya and her different stages of enlightenment? So now let's start from the beginning. As I said before, a lot of Oyas have really, really fucked up lives. I mean, they go through a lot of stuff. And if they end up having a father like Pa in any type of way, then since for an Oya, her father is going to be very, very important in her life. A lot of times, even over her mom. So if a Oya have a very, very strong alpha male for a father, she might still end up being crazy. But instead of going after Oguns who don't know how to love, they just know how to be rough and aggressive and overly protective, they might end up giving Shango a try. And since she's already had that guidance and that upbringing from an alpha male, she would know how to position herself in Shango's life to where she would be more of a helpmeet to him. Because the main reason why Obatala chose Obanani over Oya to be Shango's wife is simply because Oya was all over the place. He knew that it would be damn near impossible to make Shango settle down with Oya. But just think if her upbringing was a little different, where she didn't witness the things that was going on with Ogun and Yemoya. And there are many, many different paths of Oya that shows just that. So like I say, I really urge you all to do your research on the many paths of these Orishas, because Google and looking online and stuff like that, they're only going to show you the most popular version of these Orishas. But as far as the path goes, it's really deep, and it really helps you to appreciate and even understand some things that might be going on in your life, especially if you found out that you're a daughter of Oya. Now, until this daughter of Oya goes through her stages of enlightenment, she's going to be just like Sealy, lost, depressed, suicidal at times, and she's going to, if left to her own devices, end up looking at any old representation of dominance and control as a form of inspiration. Because I've witnessed women who were daughters of Oya who had mothers that were either like Shug or like Sophia, and it really plays a part in their capacity to love and their capacity to be feminine, which is the reason why it is so very important for Oyas to get that balance and that enlightenment. Now, when I'm talking about the many faces of Oya, what I'm really talking about are the different phases of Oya, because both Sealy, Sophia, and Shug all represent different sides of Oya and different incarnations of the energy of Oya. And in order for her to be able to get that enlightenment, just like Sealy, that daughter of Oya is going to need all of these entities when it comes to their stages of enlightenment. So let me explain this. So in the movie, they kind of switched it up a little bit, but this is how an Oya going up her 3 stages of enlightenment would kind of look. Now, we all know how Sealy started. Now, for my daughters of Oyas out there, that first stage of enlightenment is the Shug stage. That's stage 1. And Shug, her job was that even though she kind of teased her at the beginning with that unforgettable quote, her job, and the reason why Sealy was so infatuated and inspired by Shug, because Shug really started to teach Sealy how beautiful and valuable Sealy really was on a mental and physical level. And as you can see, it really took a lot. But at the end of the day, you see how much of a different type of woman that Sealy started to be. The more she started to hang around Shug, and Shug started to really give her that confidence and really made her believe that she was beautiful and she was sexy and all of these type of things. And you can really tell how Sealy's self-esteem started to rise. Now, the thing about it is, my daughters of Oya out there, you can't stop here, because like I said, that stage 1 Lilith stage is very enticing. It's easy to stay right here, but no, if you do, it's not going to end good for you, because the work is still not done. And it's very easy for you to wild out and be on some sexual controlling and dominatrix type of stuff. And like I say, you know, there are many temptations out there, especially for daughters of Oya. So then after you really start to mentally get that therapy and you start learning to love yourself and pick yourself up, start to look at yourself as being beautiful and all of these type of things, and you start dressing different, you start looking different, you start taking more care of your physical appearance and all of this stuff. And then now we have stage 2, which is the Sophia stage. Now, we all remember how Oprah Winfrey played that role of Sophia, and it's really messed up because Oprah Winfrey being a Sagittarius moon and an Aquarius sun, if Oprah Winfrey was on our side, oh my God, she would be such a fucking powerhouse. Like, she would be like a Frances Cress Welsing, Joy DeGruy with a sprinkle of Zaza Ali. She would be all those women in one, because a Sagittarius moon is a very powerful moon sign, and coupled with an Aquarius sun, oh my Lord. So we see that with her working for the enemy and being more of a gossip queen than a messenger of divine feminine wisdom, which with her being the birth path number 4, this is what all of this stuff that Oprah Winfrey is going through right now, this is what this is going to teach her. That all of those people, while you're being the gossip queen, you thought they had your back, and you're going to start to see when they fall, you're going to fall. And we're seeing that right now. So when we think about Sophia in regards to the 3 stages of enlightenment, in regards to a daughter of Oya, Sophia in her rightful place, she represents the divine feminine. Even in Greek, she represents the black goddess of wisdom, divine femininity, and fates. And in some mythologies, is also known as the mother of creation. Now, when we talk about Yoruba spirituality, the goddess Sophia will be split between Nana Baruku and Yemoya, which are often always personified as a heavyset black woman with big long breasts and who is super fertile. And there's a lot of mother goddesses that fall under this paradigm, like La Serene, Yemoya in some cases, and also La Madama, which is where we get the whole black mammy stereotype from anyway. So the biblical meaning of Sophia means wisdom and skill for prosperity. So now Oya has learned to love herself on an outward level and on a mental level. And now when she goes to stage 2, this is where Oya really starts to learn that divine wisdom and those divine feminine skills from her grandmother that's going to teach her how to love and how to be feminine and how to be caring. And this is also going to teach her how to use her powers, her many powers that she has, how to use them in a positive type of way instead of being wild and uncontrollable and ferocious. Stage 2 teaches Oya that there's a time and place for everything, and not everything has to end in a storm and a disaster and all of those type of things. So now she's at stage 2.5, and like I say in my shadow work class, that I'm so excited to say that I've been getting people joining that class since I promoted it, and I can't wait to do that class. It's going to be so dope. But a little nugget from the class is on stage 2.5, that's when the shadow work starts. Now, in the color purple, what was the shadow work? Well, we know that Oya and her sister Eyao are inseparable, so much so that they're literally two sides of the same coin. Now, what is the only thing that we have as men and women that are inseparable with us, and that is two sides of the same coin? You guessed it, your soul, aka your inner child. And your inner child is your twin brother or twin sister. And remember how smart Nettie was. Remember how beautiful but still fierce that Nettie was. How she wasn't going for Mr.'s advances and hit him in the nuts with that backpack when he tried to rape her. Think about how Nettie was the one that taught Celie how to write and all of these things as a little girl, which means that Nettie was well traveled and she was well educated and intelligent. And those are all the things that you get from an Aquarius. But remember, until Nettie ended up back in Celie's life, her life was still incomplete. Even though she was in a better environment, had a better situation going on, she still was incomplete without Nettie. Just like us, we can have it all. We can get the money, we can get the cars and the clothes, and we can be alpha as men. But until we do that shadow work and really become one with our soul, aka get to know our inner child, all those things can be taken away from us. And that sense of accomplishment and that sense of being dominant, all of those traits are going to go with the material things. So her doing the shadow work was identical to in the color purple when Suge started to tell Celie about the letters that she was secretly getting that she didn't even know about, that Nettie was sending her, and how Celie and Suge started to search that home from top to bottom until in a hidden compartment under the floorboard they was able to find that box that had all of those many letters that Nettie has been writing her ever since she was a little girl. And all those skills that she learned, those skills that taught her how to read and those skills that taught her how to comprehend, and she was able to use all of those skills that she learned to read those letters, and those letters gave her back that sense of identity. She was reading about all the adventures that Nettie was going through in Africa, how she reunited with her two children that belonged to Celie, and all of those things. All the things that she thought was lost forever was given back to her through Nettie. So what that symbolizes is, since we were small, we've been through different situations that may have snatched our innocence away from us, just like how Nettie was snatched away from Celie in her most vulnerable time of need. And it's up to us to get back reunited with our innocence, aka our soul and our inner child, because that's where our true power is at. And that's where all of those things in our life, spiritually and psychologically, all of those things that we thought we lost, when we do that shadow work and we start to uncover those truths that lay hidden, aka we start to spiritually look under our floorboards and find the letters or the symbols or the form of communication that our soul or our ancestors have been trying to communicate with us. And just like the way Celie felt when she got reunited with Nettie, that is the same way that you, daughter of Oya, are going to feel when you reunite with your inner child, which is nothing but a form of Ayao, that long lost sister that completely and equally balanced you out, that y'all vowed to never be apart, and now y'all are back together again. So in my meditation, I asked Oya, what is the significance of the different color sashes that she got around her dress? Now, the Babalaos and the Patakis would say that each of the sashes or the different color scars around her dress represent the 9 children that were stillbirth. But Oya says it's a lot deeper than that. It is so hard for a daughter of Oya to be balanced because there's so many different trials and tribulations and so many lessons that daughters of Oya has to learn. And each time she learns a new lesson and learns how to control an aspect of herself, she receives a sash, kind of like a Boy Scout when you get a ribbon or a button or something like that after you complete a certain task. And each of these trials or tribulations represent a different color. Now, depending on how old the daughter of Oya gets before she starts to go on her stages of enlightenment, a lot of daughters of Oya, they age like fine wine and they get better with time, because in a lot of cases, the older she got, the more of these lessons that she learned. And if she's completed that, even though she's Aunt Yansa, she's going to be able to give any children around her that she's taking care of, she's going to be able to give them some really solid wisdom, that Sophia wisdom. And before I forget, I want to add this part in here too. Even though it was a small hint and they really didn't go in when it came to this, but we know that Oya has another sister named Aja, and Aja is the Orisha and the spirit of the forest, the animals within it, and as well as herbal healers. She holds the secrets to botany and is a master of potions and healing herbs. So with that being said, it was very symbolic that she had a daughter named Olivia. And when we look up the name Olivia, it means of the olive tree. And we know how spiritually significant the olive tree is. It represents stability and tranquility, and it symbolizes the eternal link between man and earth. And when we talk about man, remember that Celie also had a son named Adam, which translates to the word man. I can't make this up, y'all. I really can't. I can't make this up. So in closing, this movie also shows you how the many faces of Oya find balance. So we have the harlot who finds God, the mother who finds a son, and lastly, Celie, who represents the woman who started out blind, but she found her sight from going within and finding herself. And that, my friends, is the many faces of Oya, Part 2, The Color Purple. So I really hope that y'all enjoyed this video. This was super hard to make. It took many hours of audio. I don't know how long this is going to be in post, but I just hope that y'all took something from this. I hope it was informational and I was able to shed some light on some things that you may or may not have known. And going into this year, I'm going to make more videos talking about different Orishas that I haven't touched on. Like when I talk about the goddess Ashira, I'm gonna bring up Aja more in that video. And also I want to talk about the Orisha Aye, which is the Orisha of money, and her and Oshun hang out together. I want to talk about the birth of Shango and how he came into the mix when it came to Oshun and Eshu. And lastly, that Michael Jackson Part 5 is gonna be epic, as well as the Eshu and Pumbagera. Man, I got so much stuff that I gotta drop, man. Like I say, I'm really trying to build up my catalog so that soon I can start moving videos around. And when I make that move, I really hope that you all move with me. As I said before, the shadow work class is still going on for early enrollment. So if you want to be a part of that very informative class, it's on my website, which is bandclaptv.com. And as you can see, the price right now is $22, but it's not going to stay there because, like I said, this is a 3 to 3.5 hour course. It's very informative. You're really going to get a lot out of this. So the sale that I'm doing right now is the first 11 people to sign up for this class is going to be $22. After that, the price is going to rise up. I'm still trying to figure out what price I'm going to keep it at, and I'll be explaining and going over that in further announcements in the future. So y'all make sure that y'all are periodically checking on the BandClap TV site, because there's always going to be new things added. Make sure y'all are following me on all of my social media platforms: Instagram, BandClap TV, Facebook, BandClap TV, Snapchat, because I update on all of those platforms when anything is going on with me or my brand or anything like that. And yeah, like I said, if y'all like me doing these, I'll do these a lot more. Now, stuff like this takes a lot of work, so in the future, stuff like this is gonna be either on Patreon or stuff like that. And my rant videos, I'll still do those on YouTube for the most part. But yeah, man, it's 2020. It's time to monetize your gifts and talents. I've been giving away free game for almost 3 years, so it's been about that time. Man, people been hit me up like, yo, man, this shit right here is too deep, man. You need to start making some money off of this. Like, you need to start having people pay you for this hard work that you put into your videos. And in this time that we're in now, where entrepreneurship is the way to go, since we're in this economic crisis, I feel like now is a better time as any to go ahead and get some things together, since I have all the time in the world now. So I'll definitely be able to make more videos and stuff like that. So all of these things are in the works, and so definitely stay tuned, stay safe, make sure everybody's out there washing your hands and doing all of that bullshit. It ain't bullshit, it's essential. Make sure y'all are doing the things that y'all know y'all supposed to do, spiritually and physically. The spiritual is never really talked about like that. Everybody likes to focus on the physical, but spiritually, make sure y'all doing what y'all supposed to do as well. So shout out to all of my daughters of Oya out there, all of my daughters of Yemoya, all of my wind signs. And as you know, BandClap TV, we out. And no matter what, you gotta stay shining, because I'm trying to tell y'all, man, y'all folks out there ain't trying to stay shining, man.